Hi everyone, it's Heidi again. We are still moving into our new room. It's a complete disaster in here. Do not mind. Today we're going to be reacting to a TED Talk. It's called Germany, Low Crime, Clean Prisons, Lessons for America by Jeff Rosen. I'm not exactly sure. But it's cool because this was recorded at Mountain View High School, which is about 15 minutes away from where I live. So that's kind of neat. So thank you to whoever recommended this, probably 3 years ago. I do have to say that I have learned just a little bit about the justice system in the United States versus other countries, especially, I guess, like Western European countries, right? But I am not incredibly well versed with this kind of stuff, but I do want to keep learning more. And so that is why we have this channel, because I love starting conversations about this kind of stuff and learning from you guys too. But otherwise, if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe, become a member if you want me to prioritize your comments, and let's do this. Really quickly, I did look at the description. So Rosen is at least 8 years ago. This guy was, I have to read it, a prosecutor and a recognized leader in criminal justice reform, served as a president of a large synagogue, taught trial advocacy at Santa Clara University Law School, and trained police officers in report writing, just in case anybody else was interested in the context as well.
When I was growing up, my family didn't have a dog. Other kids in the neighborhood had a dog. So one day I asked my dad, why don't we have a dog? And my dad said, because they used hunts on us. Meaning that the Nazis used dogs to attack and intimidate my family, my dad and my grandmother, during the 3 years that they spent in Nazi concentration camps.
Oh, wow.
We also didn't have a German car, no Volkswagen, no Mercedes, no BMW.
Interesting.
Nazi cars is what my dad called them.
Interesting.
Last summer, I was standing at the Hertz rental car counter in Berlin when the clerk said to me, Mr. Rosen, I'm very sorry, we don't have the car that you reserved. And my face kind of fell. And the clerk said, but don't worry, Mr. Rosen, I have really good news for you. I've got a car that has a sunroof, and it's leather, and it's big. It's a wonderful luxury car. Mr. Rosen, let me show you the beautiful Mercedes-Benz that we have for you.
Yep.
And I thought, this is going to be kind of an interesting road trip where I'm going to be taking this car. I'll tell you where I took this car at the end of this talk. Let me first tell you why I went to Germany to begin with and what I learned there. Last summer, I went to Germany with 20 other people from the United States. A pretty distinguished group, a governor, another district attorney, several prominent academics, conservative activists, progressive activists, the head of a nonprofit association, a few reporters, 60 Minutes, the television news program, and a convicted murderer from Detroit. One big happy family. Germany has a very low crime rate and a very low incarceration rate, meaning a very low percentage of their citizens who are in prisons. By contrast, the United States murder rate is 9 times as high as in Germany, and we incarcerate 10 times.
Sorry, I needed to sneeze.
At the rate of 10 times as many as they do in Germany.
Sorry, I need to.
In the United States, we'll spend more.
Goodness gracious. I don't want to adjust the volume. I need to know what he was saying.
And we incarcerate 10 times at the rate of 10 times as many as they do in Germany.
And this is per capita, right? He hasn't really specified, but that's what I'm assuming. If you guys know of something different, let me know.
The United States will spend more than $50 billion a year on prisons, more than $9 billion a year alone in California. In fact, California is one of 16 states where there are more people in prison than there are in college. It costs
Now, that's an interesting statistic. I don't know if I'm misunderstanding, but I'm getting the idea that he's comparing amounts of the United States versus Germany. Is that also per capita? I don't know. Like, you can't do totals, you need to do per capita. And I don't know if he's doing that. I hope he is. I haven't gotten that impression yet. I just like to look for biases. Anyway, maybe I'm looking too into it, but we're going to continue.
It's about $50,000 a year to house someone in prison. For those of you that are seniors, you know that the cost of going to a university, all in cost, can be something like $50,000 a year, or maybe even more than that.
Mine was less because I didn't get anything special.
And I know everybody here is going to graduate, but 6 out of 100 American men who graduate from high school, but not college, will spend a year in prison before they turn 30. For high school dropouts, 28 out of 100 will spend a year in prison before they turn 30. For African American men who drop out of high school, 68%, 68 out of 100 will spend a year in prison before
wild.
they turn 30.
Wow.
However, it was not always this way in the United States. This is our incarceration rate from 1925 to about 1975. An incarceration rate is a fancy word for saying what's the percentage of our residents
Per
who are
100,000.
either in jail or prison.
Perfect.
And you'll see that from 1925 to 1975, that 50-year period, it's about 100 per 100,000. And it's pretty stable. It goes up a little bit in around 1940, comes down a little bit, but it's very stable. But then something quite dramatic happens from the mid-1970s until today. And you'll see, from the mid-1970s until today, the incarceration rate shoots up to where it is today at around 700 per 100,000.
Why?
In a 7-fold, 700% increase.
Is it because of the economy?
To put this in context a little bit, what about other countries, right? Well, when we compare ourselves to other democracies, to other first world democratic nations,
that's crazy.
our incarceration rate is off the chart, as you can see. We're by far the highest. Every other country in Europe, including Australia, Canada, is much, much lower than ours. And as you see, Germany, almost maybe a tenth, little 9 times fewer people incarcerated than in our country. So there was a study done by the National Academy of Sciences in 2014, and they concluded that the growth in the incarceration rate in our country over the last 40 years is historically unprecedented and internationally unique. Now, it's historically unprecedented because look what we were for 50 years. So it's unprecedented for ourselves. This is not the way we've done things in this country, but it's also internationally unique. When we compare ourselves to other countries, we're incarcerating far, far more individuals than they are.
Yes.
Now, it turns out that even as the incarceration rate in our country increased and increased and increased, crime fell and fell and fell. Now, some people will say, oh, well, the reason that crime fell and fell and fell is because our incarceration rates rose and rose and rose. See, and the argument is simple. The reason crime went down is we got tough, and we sent more people to prison, we made the prisons harsher, we made the prison sentences longer, we didn't let people out on parole, and that taught people, and that's why crime went down.
Yeah, that is a really interesting opinion and perspective, because if you look at the table, the incarceration rate has risen quite a bit, and then the crime rate has gone, it's gone down a little bit. It doesn't match the incarceration rate, which is, that's really interesting to see that and then have him bring up that perspective. Fascinating.
That's a pretty simple and straightforward argument. Kind of appeals to a Wild West sort of mentality. And remember, when you're trying to persuade people of something, a simple argument, something that people can understand, kind of gets you halfway there towards persuading them. People can understand something, they're more likely to agree with it than if they don't understand it. Now,
Fair.
the problem with this argument, and there's only one, sort of very small problem with this idea, is it's completely wrong.
Exactly.
And the way that we know this is it turns out that crime doesn't just have sort of trends in cities or countries, but across the Western world, across the developed world, Europe, Australia, Canada, it turns out that crime has moved in parallel since the Middle Ages. And we know this from all kinds of records that we have uncovered. And it turns out that from the kind of mid-19th century until the 1950s, 1960s, crime fell throughout cities around the world. And then from the 1960s to the early 1990s, crime rose. Property crime, violent crime rose all over the Western world. But then, beginning in the early 1990s until today, crime fell all throughout Europe, Australia, Canada, the United States. It fell in all of those places. Now, let's take a look at our neighbor to the north, Canada. The reason I like to use Canada as an example, but I could do this with any country in Europe, is, right, we share a border with Canada.
Oh, sorry. It took me forever to find the, what is it called? Oh my gosh, where it tells you what color means what in the top left. A legend? I feel like there's a different word for it. Maybe that is the word that I'm thinking of. I swear there's another word for it. If there are any other synonyms, please let me know. That's driving me insane. Anyway, let's continue. So sorry about that.
Right,
I'm going to go back a little bit.
Canada. The reason I like to use Canada as an example, but I could do this with any country in Europe, is, right, we share a border with Canada. Right, we think Canadians are sort of like us, except nicer, a little bit nicer. I think that's the stereotype of Canadians.
It is.
So if you look here, these are a comparison of robbery rates in the United States and in Canada. And you'll notice that the rates kind of tick up in the early 1990s in both countries and then begin to fall to rates that weren't seen in either country till the 1960s. So crime, robbery fell in both countries. The same with homicide. Our rate is on top. We have more robberies, we have more homicides. The Canadian rate is underneath. But you'll see the same kind of pattern.
Yeah.
Again, in the early 1990s, there's sort of an uptick in murder. That's what homicide is, a kind of murder. And then from the 1990s, in both countries, it falls back to levels not seen since the 1950s or 1960s. Right? So in other words, in the United States and Canada, crime was rising in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s. In both countries, crime went up. And then crime started to fall in both countries. Okay, well, why did the crime fall? Well, if in the United States you say it fell because you see we got tough and we put a lot more people in prison, well, what did Canada do in terms of its incarceration rate? Here's what we did, right? Our incarceration rate's on top. We responded by throwing a lot more people in prison for a lot longer. Our crime rate goes our incarceration rate goes way up. What did Canada do? Nothing. The same thing that they'd been doing for the last 100 years. And what's interesting about Canada is their incarceration rate of about 100 per 100,000 people. Wait a minute, where have we heard that before? That's what our incarceration rate was from 1925 until 1975. And so it turns out that what affects crime rates is a lot more than just how many people that you put in prison. New York University Law School a couple years ago came out with a very documented, extensive study, and they found that they found three things. Number one, increasing incarceration rates, throwing more people in prison for longer, will have a negligible effect on crime. Number two, better policing, including the use of data to target police resources, has played a significant role in the drop in crime. And number three, certain socioeconomic factors have played a large part in reducing crime. And those factors are an aging population, smaller families, and decreased alcohol consumption.
Interesting.
So let's sort of move from a little bit from a lot about statistics and policies to what I saw in Germany.
I don't know about you guys, but I want to know just why there are more incarcerations. Maybe he'll go into it. I don't know. Was it just, I don't know, the government like thinking that that would be a good idea or something and it's not? I want to know the reason, but I just wonder if there is a clear answer about that. I'm sure that it's complicated. Anyway, that is very interesting to me.
Now, German prisons are very different than American prisons. Number one, they're a lot smaller.
Pretty close to my
The largest prison in Germany is Tegel Prison in Berlin. It has 1,200 inmates. Most German prisons are much smaller. They have 300 to 500 inmates in them.
Okay.
By contrast, American prisons, very large. The largest, Rikers Island in New York, over 14,000 inmates. Angola State Prison in Louisiana, more than 5,000 inmates. California, if you drive an hour and a half north to San Quentin, 3,500 inmates. If you drive an hour and a half south to Soledad State Prison, 3,600 inmates. Much, much larger.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? To me, at least, a prison with 500 or 600 inmates does seem really small. My high school had at least 3,000 people in it, so that just sounds tiny. But I don't know, are we abnormal for having really huge prisons? Or is that just something special that Germany has? That would be interesting to know too. These more complex questions I really would love to look into, but I am trying to finish this recording before Hail Baby wakes up. Otherwise, I could just research this kind of stuff all day. Wouldn't that be nice if we all had that kind of time? Anyway.
Secondly, German prisoners wear their own clothes. They dress just like you do. They cook their own meals, and they have tremendous freedom of movement within the prison. By contrast, American prisoners, right, we all know they wear identical uniforms. They're confined in their cells for most of the day, and they eat meals in these large cafeterias.
You know, I never thought about, so we learned about, I think in Norway, their kind of prison system, especially a very specialized prison system, where it sounds very similar to what he was describing about Germany's inmates. And I never thought about how much of an impact it would be to allow inmates to keep their individuality. I feel like, yeah, dressing them all the same, keeping them all in the same place while eating, just kind of keeping them in this line at all times. But like taking their entire quality of life, quality of self, identity of self, I don't even know. I feel like that would be, first of all, very depressing, and that doesn't help with, what's the word, not reincarceration, reintegration. And I do think that American prisons, that is not their highest priority. And it's interesting learning just a little bit about the difference when a court system or justice system focuses on not reincarceration, reintegration, and how reincarceration after that is much lower when that is the focus. And I didn't think about even the uniforms that they give them playing a part in that difference. Anyway, thank you so much for bearing with me in all of that. I had to cut out a lot because I was having a hard time forming my thoughts. But anyway, let's continue.
German prisoners have their own cell, telephone in it, and their own kind of toilet as well. And let's look a little bit at HailHeidi prison. This is the most recently built prison in Germany. It was built in 2013. So you see from the outside, right, barbed wire, looks like a prison. This is an entryway into it. This is just a place where everybody can walk through the prison to get from one place to another. You see there's a lot of natural light. There's kind of a sense of design and style. And the photos I'm showing you are exactly what the prison looked like when we saw it last summer.
That's
so if the photos, if you think that, oh gosh, it looks immaculate, it looks cleaner than this high school, this is how it looks.
Seriously?
Exactly how we saw it. Again, a lot of light, a lot of natural light, a lot of glass that comes in. This is, you'll see, this is looking into the dormitories where individuals live, and there's like kind of a balcony on each floor, a couple balconies for inmates to go and get a little bit of fresh air, right? The only difference is, yes, there's bars there, so someone doesn't try to jump or try to escape. But it's very pleasant. There's a lot of grass, and it's a feeling that's more akin to being, frankly, on a junior college campus than it is to being in a prison. So I'm going to take you, this is a hallway, and the doors on either side are where the cells are. So we're going to take you into a cell in just a moment here.
Okay. Something that I find very interesting about this prison in particular is that to me, it looks more like a rehab center or a hospital. And I think that's a very fascinating thing that I think that other countries, they treat inmates as kind of like sick, like there's something wrong and they're trying to fix whatever's going on instead of treating it as a punishment and like a timeout. That is so fascinating. And I know that that can be very difficult when somebody is a victim of a violent crime. I feel like they can have the mentality of, oh, they need to be punished. I need their lives to be miserable, that kind of idea. But what is that helping? Especially if they're going to be released from prison at some point. They're not going to come out much better. Nothing's going to change, and there will most likely be more violent crime because of it. But just this design it's so interesting. I just can't get out of my head that it looks more like a rehab center. And I never thought about crime being something to be treated as like a sickness. I mean, when you think about it, human beings who commit crime, there's probably something very wrong with them up here. I wonder if they do any kind of like psychological tests or treatments or rehab, right, in prisons like this. I could see that happening. It would just be interesting to see if that's actually a thing. Anyway, some of my thoughts. What do you guys think about that? It's really fascinating to me and different.
So this is what
It's like a hospital. Wow.
a typical cell looks like. It's not very large, about 100 square feet. I mean, they told us that in, this thing called the metric system, which Americans don't understand, but it's about 100 square feet. And you'll see there's a little, there would be a mattress over on the side there, a small mattress. There's a desk, there's a telephone, there's a window for natural light. And there's also an area, there's a little partition where there's a toilet and a sink. Now, President Obama visited a federal state prison last summer. He went to El Reno Federal State Prison in Oklahoma.
Okay.
And he saw prison cells there that were about this size. The difference being in those cells, 2 or 3 inmates would live, whereas in Germany there's only 1. Mm-hmm. There's a lot less violence in German prisons than in American prisons. And part of that is because individuals are living in their own cell. Now, for some of you that are going to college next year, the size of this cell is very much the same size as the dormitory that I lived in when I went to UCLA. Yeah. Maybe the dorm room I had was a little bit larger, but there were 2 of us in it. But there's a big difference between kind of 2 college students, maybe one who's a little bit too clean and one who's too messy, and having a rapist and a murderer sharing a cell this size.
So
right?
true.
Think about that. So
yes.
Now, this is...
Really quickly, I wish that he would have maybe shown a picture of the prison that Obama visited. I want to see the difference because one of the things just from American prisons that I've seen in the past, the thing that is really sticking out to me is just lighting differences. I feel like that cell was very bright. They had white, uplifting, and light colors, I guess. And prisons, I feel, are always very dark, very gray, very little natural lighting, of course. And that is honestly enough to drive someone insane if they weren't already insane going into prison. I remember, it's funny because I'm wearing a Mr. Beast hoodie right now, but I was thinking about a Mr. Beast video of some guy who was living in a grocery store for I don't know how many days, I can't remember. And the fact that there were just not a lot of windows and he was just inside really had an effect on him. He had everything he needed. He had all the food he needed, things like that. But just the absence of natural lighting can be a night and day difference, you can say, when it comes to someone's mental health. Very, very interesting. And I feel like some people could see giving inmates, criminals, natural lighting like this as a reward or making their life cushy or something like that when they don't deserve it. But again, the difference is, I guess, reincarceration versus not rehabilitation. I literally said this word like 5 minutes ago. Why can't I think of it? Going into society. What the freak is the word? Okay, I don't even see it, but it's reintegration. I thought of it. Oh my goodness. I guess reentry as well could be the word. Guys, my brain sometimes, oh, it's a struggle. Here we go.
There's little cafeteria areas on each of the floors, and there's a little kitchen here. And
like a
we
break
asked the
room.
German prison officials, in that kitchen, are there knives? Are there pots and pans? You know, are there dangerous and deadly weapons from the American perspective? And the German correctional officer said, well, of course. I mean, that's what you would cook with. So
Interesting.
much different view about what inmates should have. The German view is trying to have people live in prison the way they're going to live when they're outside of prison. They're going to need to cook
like
their own meals and know how to do that. So let's have them do that here. And this is just another view of that. Now, very interesting things about German prisons. Every year, if an inmate in prison is doing mental health counseling, you know, going to the classes they're supposed to go to, doing vocational training, doing all the things they're supposed to do in prison, they're allowed to leave the prison for a few hours or even overnight, regardless of the crime they have committed. And every year there are hundreds of thousands of prison visits, prison leaves, what we might call furloughs. And out of those hundreds of thousands of leaves, we asked, well, how many times does an inmate not come back? How many times do they commit a crime when they're out? And the answer, out of all of those leaves each year, 0.3% of inmates either don't come back or commit a crime while they're out. That's 3 in 1,000. We don't have anything like that in the United States.
No.
German prisons, there are 4 kinds. They don't call them minimum, medium, maximum security. They think that calling a facility maximum security will lead to violence between the inmates and between the inmates and the staff. Like everybody's got to be tough because they're going to maximum security.
It puts walls up. It makes people nervous and uncomfortable. Max security. Yeah, that's very interesting. Something that I keep thinking about listening to him is the difference between trust in people is so stark when it comes to the United States and Germany.
So they have facilities where inmates are serving sentences of 5 years or longer, facilities where they're serving sentences of 5 years or fewer, juvenile facilities. So if you commit a crime when you're 18 years or younger, you would go to a juvenile facility and you would do pretty much your whole sentence there. So most of the people in the juvenile facilities are actually in their early to mid-20s, but the Germans want to try to segregate younger offenders away from older, more hardened criminals, so as not to have these younger offenders become more hardened criminals. And number 4, they have something called open prisons. An open prison is where you go when you have 6 months or less remaining on your sentence. And at that facility, you're encouraged to leave during the day and look for a job and look for housing, and you just have to come back there at night. The people that work in German prisons are much different than the people that work in American prisons. It's very difficult to get a job as a German correctional officer. Fewer than 10% of the applicants are accepted. It's like getting into UCLA or Berkeley or something like that to get a job like this. Their training, they have 2 years of training. Most of their training is in social work, counseling, rehabilitation. Some of it is in physical control kinds of techniques. The facilities, as I've shown you, this Heidering prison, the German prisons, they're very nice places to work. They're clean, the staff eats the same food as the inmates, and the atmosphere in the prisons is actually quite relaxed. It's not tense and angry.
You know what's actually really cool about, and it's such a simple thing, about the inmates and the prison guards, the staff, sorry, eating the same things, is that it makes them maybe feel like they're more on the same team. It's not inmates versus staff, or the staff is above the inmates and they have all the authority and stuff. They do, but just making an atmosphere where it feels like they might be a little more on equal ground that they're both human beings, that is actually a really big deal. The idea that one team or one side is better than the other team or side, I feel creates a lot of issues. And I feel like that's very common in, police officers versus civilians. It's really sad that I feel not very common for people to feel like you're on the same team as a police officer. Even me, when I'm driving by a police car, I tense up and I get really nervous. Like, okay, don't mess up. Like, don't give them the wrong idea. I'm not a criminal. That's really sad because there is already this tension that has been building for decades, and it's just kind of there now. It makes both civilians and police officers really on their guard. I mean, I feel like we could have an entire video on that. It's an interesting and sad topic. Okay.
Now, the obvious question is why? Article 1 of the German Constitution.
Oh, that was quite a sound. Sorry, why what? I want to listen to his last sentence.
And the atmosphere in the prisons is actually quite relaxed. Yeah. It's not tense and angry.
Exactly.
Now, the obvious question is why? Article 1 of the German Constitution. Human dignity shall be inviolable. To respect and protect it shall be the duty of all state authority. That's the number one most important thing in the German Constitution. And that's been cited by the German Supreme Court to give inmates one person per cell, no solitary confinement, no death penalty, and everyone's eligible for parole there. Now, of course, this German Constitution didn't come out of nowhere. I wanted to show you the picture of Shaka Senghor. He was the convicted murderer from Detroit who came on this trip with us. He's been released. He's doing very well. He spent 7.5 years in solitary confinement in a Michigan state prison. The German officials think that this is cruel and almost torture, and we're surprised that he's not completely insane.
Interesting. Wow. Now, oh my gosh. They're surprised that he's not completely insane. Gosh, that's so true. I mean, just what we were talking about earlier, conditions that inmates are in here in the United States, it is enough to drive someone insane if they weren't already in the first place. Wow. The way he said that very much struck me anyway. And it's so hard. It is so hard because whoever that person murdered, the victim's family who knows that he's the murderer, I'm sure that just seeing a picture of his face, maybe in this video, could really be triggering. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's just out and about after what he did. He doesn't deserve anything, right? So that is very, very hard, I am sure. I could not even imagine not feeling really angry that your loved one's murderer is being treated well. But it is a thing where you don't want them to keep murdering. So you have to make the sacrifices to help them to get better, I guess. It kind of is a complicated, emotionally complicated topic. It's really fascinating to learn about, but I do love what they're doing in Germany, I guess.
I said to you that I showed you the German Constitution. That Constitution in Germany was written in 1949, while Germany was occupied by the United States, Britain, and France after World War II. Oh, wow. That was written in the shadow of the Holocaust and what the German government had done. And so it's not a surprise that the number one thing was respect human dignity.
Yeah.
Now, finished my week-long trip there, got in the Mercedes-Benz, and started to drive to Bergen-Belsen. The car started to speak to me in German and give me directions. I don't speak German, and I wasn't real comfortable being told what to do in German, particularly given the fact that I was going to Bergen-Belsen. I arrived at Bergen-Belsen about 3 hours later.
Wow.
My father and grandmother were in Bergen-Belsen from January 1945 until April 15th, 1945. This was their third concentration camp. They'd been in 2 other.
So his grandparents, he said, were in this camp when it was liberated. That is, wow. Also, 10,000 unburied dead is absolutely crazy. I'm glad that I paused just now. I wasn't planning on pausing to read the sign, but because I had a comment, I did. And yeah, that is pretty powerful stuff. Anyway.
Slave labor camps in Poland. By the time they got to Bergen-Belsen in 1945, there were 60,000 people and 10,000 corpses. That's dead people. in an area less than 0.2 square miles, less than half the size of your campus here. So there wasn't a need for people to shoot, to kill people. Disease like typhus and typhoid killed thousands of people. Even after the camp was liberated in April of 1945 by the British, another 10,000 people died the next month.
More.
In March of 1945, at the same time, my family, my dad, my grandmother were there. Anne Frank and her sister Margot, you may have heard of her, died in March of 1945. So I got to the camp.
Okay, hold on. His family has to do with Anne Frank.
Let me just died the next
listen
month.
to that again, sorry.
In March of 1945, at the same time, my family, my dad, my grandmother were there. Anne Frank and her sister Margot, you may have heard of her, died in March of 1945.
They were in the camp at the same... Sorry, I don't know why I'm having a hard time understanding this. So they died when his grandparents were there. I'm having a hard time with timeline in my head. I apologize.
Camp looked like it was burned to the ground by the British to get rid of all the disease that was there, and so there's sort of a memorial that's been set up on the site. I met with Dr. Bernd Horstmann. He's the chief archivist at Bergen-Belsen, and I had corresponded with him before I came. He's about my age. He's not Jewish. He grew up near this camp, and I sent him the information about my family. I spent about half the day with him and half the day walking around, and he was actually able to show me the records from that the British Army kept and the Jewish Committee kept of the people that had survived. The name of the Jewish Committee's records is called Sharit HaPlata, which is often translated as Holocaust survivors or something like that. But the Hebrew is much more poignant. It means counted remnant. And in the records, I saw the original names of my dad and my grandmother,
Wow.
my remnants.
Wow.
I walked around the camp for about 4 hours. There's mounds like this all over the camp where there's tens of thousands of people that are buried underneath there. I didn't go to Germany to forgive or forget, and I didn't either, but I went to learn. How did a country that had done such horrible things recreate itself so quickly into one of the most enlightened when it comes to crime and punishment?
Yeah.
If Dostoevsky was correct when he said the degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prisons,
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
then how civilized are we?
Not.
What I learned from visiting gleaming prisons, talking to correctional officers and convicted criminals, and in walking through a quiet field of mass graves, is that the world might be broken, but it can be repaired because we're all created with human dignity. Thank you.
Wow. Oh man, you know, that was actually a really good one to react to not long after we reacted to Hagen-Rathers. I know I'm butchering that pronunciation, but the nothing changes kind of speech that he gave. And this TED Talk being 8 years ago, at least that's when it was posted on YouTube. I don't know if it was before then. I feel like a lot has happened even since then when it comes to especially United States politics and government. Our government is actually in a shutdown right now, but apparently, I think last time Trump was in office, there was also a government shutdown, so I don't even know what's going on. But there's definitely a lot of contention, there's a lot of fear in the United States right now, and I mean, with our relationship to other countries as well, there's a lot of just drama going on. And again, what Hagen-Rathers was saying, it's crazy how Germany changed so fast. Just like this video said. What an amazing kind of revolution, I guess. Like, it can give the rest of the world hope. If there's some weird situation going on, like our prison system, then things can always change. I said in the Nothing Changes video that sometimes it can be terrifying knowing what sacrifices sometimes go into these kind of changes, especially these just giant mass changes of an entire country. Like, people die and people have their lives destroyed, really, before this kind of change happens sometimes. That can be very scary for people. It's scary for me. It's an interesting thing to think about, and it's cool to think of it as an entire species that we can do that. We can make big changes like that over time. I'm cutting out a lot of ums because when I'm feeling nervous or uncomfortable, I say a lot. And this is one of those topics that makes me a little uncomfortable. It's a good thing to learn about. It's a good thing to learn from. It does give me hope for the United States specifically. Thank you so much for recommending this video. This one was a little bit of a longer one. I'm really glad. Hail baby stayed asleep the whole time. Please feel free to let me know what your thoughts are. It's a topic that really fascinates me and I think is really important. So thank you so much for watching with me and having this conversation with me. Let me know what else I should be watching on this channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.